Welcome to True You Ministries. I'm Stacy Echeverria, your pastoral counselor. I am a licensed pastoral counselor whose own journey has taught me the importance of having a safe place to discuss the harder issues of life. I'm so grateful that you've joined me this week. You can learn more about me and my heartfelt desire to help people much like yourself who may be at a place of pain and confusion by calling me at 626-461-3344. That's 626-461-3344. Or feel free to email me at info@trueyouministries.com. Now, sit back, listen, watch, and enjoy the show. And welcome to another episode of True You Ministries. Today, I have special guest Thomas Pfanner. We'll be discussing how to stop parenting and start leading. And before we get into this topic, let me share a little bit about Thomas. He is a husband, a father of three, a combat athlete, and a former Division I strength coach. After becoming a father at 18, he's overcome the adversity of being pushed out of his son's life and has since rebuilt a resilient blended family. In his 7 years as a public educator, Thomas saw firsthand the stark gap in real-world readiness young men and women face today. Thomas's principles of how to stop parenting and start leading have helped hundreds of men create a life-changing shift in their relationship with their kids and their wives. Welcome to the show, Thomas. It's good to have you here.
Thank you so much, Stacy. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into this topic because this is something that even those in the political arena, like Larry Elder, are talking about, fathers missing, in their homes, but also there's not a lot out there helping men and dads be the parent leaders that they're needing to be. So I'm excited to get started. But before we do, would love to hear a little bit about your own personal story.
Absolutely. A little bit bouncing off of what you mentioned, I became a dad at 18, and this journey of, the leadership dad started when my son was in 8th grade. And I guess you could even take it back to 7th grade. So when he was in 7th grade, his mom and I had him 50-50. And he was halftime with my wife and I and halftime with his mom. We both lived in the same town of Eugene, Oregon. During that 7th grade year, this was during COVID, right when they were starting to go back to the hybrid schools. And she made the move. She made a move to Central Oregon. And Charles said, "Hey, I don't want to move to Central Oregon. I want to stay here in Eugene with Dad and stay in my same school." And so for a period, it was really amazing. I had more time with Charles. He was working over the summer. I coached his football team. He was passing his classes. So on the surface, things were really good. But underneath that, there were embers in his heart that were starting to ignite in a bad direction. And that was coming to fruition when we were about halfway through January of his 8th grade year. And he had been living with my wife and I full time for about 9 months. And I remember I got the phone call. It was dark, cold, wet night in Oregon. And he said, "Dad, I'm done with you. I'm tired of being controlled. I'm moving in with Mom."
Wow. Wow, that's heartbreaking.
And in that moment, it was like all this work that I had been doing for the last 14 years was just slipping away. We had gone through court battles, and there was actually another one on the horizon because she had moved out and Charles wanted to stay. We were going to make that official so that there wasn't any question of like my ability to make decisions for him. And he, it was no one to turn to. I couldn't talk to a teacher about Charles. Charles wasn't ready to talk to me. The only person I could turn to was myself.
Right.
What was my skill set? What was missing? And I was a middle school teacher. I've been through training. I know, like, I wasn't I wasn't unsavvy with how to talk and communicate with kids or middle schoolers, high schoolers. It's just that the level that I needed to be with my leadership wasn't there yet.
Right.
And so I had to ask myself, what is the steps to get my connection with Charles and my leadership for Charles to the space that it needs to be? And it needed to happen quickly, because during that back half of his 8th grade year, he didn't pass. He had like mostly all Fs in his classes. He was doing very poorly in 8th grade out in Central Oregon. So I knew I needed to get out here. And I knew he needed to create a shift, because otherwise he could have a high school dropout by Christmas of his freshman year.
Right.
And so my wife and I, we left our home that we had purchased in 2015. So if you're familiar, like we bought it before everything, the prices started to go up, and we left the comfort and security of her job and my job as a teacher. And this is all while we have my daughter, Maddie, who at the time was just about to turn 3, and my daughter, Leela, who was about probably 5 or 6 months old. We made the move out here. We made the move out here to help Charles to get him going in the right direction in his life. And it's not the perfect journey, but our Charles and my connection now is very powerful. We train martial arts together on a regular basis. He was a varsity letterman in wrestling last year, and he's in his junior year right now, and he's working on a program so that he can graduate early, because he's ready to. That's just his personality. He's ready to be moving on and done with school. So that's kind of the snapshot of my story and how I came to help other dads. Because through working through this process, I realized like there are other dads that are going through that same thing, that feel their kids pulling away, and they're looking for something to bring it back together.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm happy to hear of a positive outcome with you and your son. I know it's a work in progress, right? It just is.
Yes.
Yeah. But that's great that it got turned around. So, so share with us, the scripture, Matthew 10:16, I'm sending you like lambs into a pack of wolves. So be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. How does this scripture fit into what you do?
I believe as men, we are called to have range. And this is what Jesus is talking about. How I describe it is the word range. And he calls us to have the range to be able to hold a baby and be caring and sensitive and listen. And he calls us to have the range to be shrewd as snakes, which is translated in some translations, it's like wisdom. Some translations, it's sharpness, aggressiveness. And so we can't just, too often I see men being directed in one or the other, and not understanding the importance of having the range of when to fall onto the different leadership qualities that we have to have. There are times that we have to be firm and hard. And like Jesus is talking about, I'm sending you forth as, sheep amongst wolves. That's a dangerous situation. We have to be ready to protect, and we have to be ready to fight. And there are times where we are going to need to choose peace, and there are times that we need to choose war. And I don't mean war like we got to go beat somebody up, but there's times where we need to be willing to step into confrontation and step into fighting against whether it's mediocrity, whether it's something that you don't believe in as a dad that's being taught. Too often we're just told like, oh, the easiest thing, even like hearing guys, oh yeah, it's just easiest to just go with whatever my wife says. That's what I found. And like, it might be easiest in the moment, but we lose our identity as men if we're not able to stand up for what we believe in.
Right. Right. And that's a good point. And the thing too, you also lose a lot of respect as well. I know that in the moment it might seem like, yeah, it's just easier to go with what my wife wants. But what will happen is it will breed resentment in her because she will view him as someone that's weak, that doesn't have a backbone, right? And that's what women want, right? They want the men that they're married to protect, to fight for them, to stand, right? And yeah, in the moment, as you said, it might be the easiest way to go, but boy, does it create a lot of problems in the long run. You know.
Yes, especially with our kids too. And
Yeah.
now, like looking at coming from middle school, and I've seen it evolve
Mhm.
over the course.
Mhm.
I started teaching in like 2015.
Yeah.
So at the time then, like, smartphones, they were around, but like some of the kids had them, some of them, and now it's like very, um, very submerged or very, I'm trying to think of the right word, but it's ubiquitous.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
everywhere. Everybody
It's
has it,
everywhere.
right?
Mhm.
Um, and the choice that the kids have and they get conditioned to is really
Yeah.
powerful. So, like
Yeah.
for me, even growing up in the 90s, you got home
Mhm.
from school, you had a handful of channels, and
Mhm.
you turned on,
Right.
and maybe there was a good show on for like an hour. And then I was like,
Mhm.
all right, well, that show's done. I guess I'm going to start on some homework because there's
Mhm.
nothing else good on that I like. All
Right.
right. And now it's endless. Anytime, anywhere, you can
Yep.
access so
Yep.
much.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and the conditioning is, why am I not getting exactly what I want right now, right away?
Right.
And
Yeah.
my generation, and even more greatly so, my father's generation grew up where it's going to come when it's going to come. You got to
Right.
go out and find something to do. You got to
Yeah.
create something to do. You got to be
Yeah.
bored and then go play a
Yeah.
prank on your neighbor or something,
Right.
like,
Right, like TPing their front house. No.
yeah,
You know? Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, it's delaying the gratification, right?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
it can be difficult to compete with because the kids are so conditioned and ready
Yeah.
to fight
Yeah.
for immediate gratification.
Right.
It can be a more difficult battle to fight
Mhm.
today for
Mhm.
parents
Sure.
than it was 20, 30 years ago.
Right. Yeah. Because everyone's got a phone. It's like we're slaves to the phone, and the devices and the being on social media and the whole thing. And it becomes an addiction, doesn't it? It's a way of coping too, and it really tears down relationships as well because there isn't a lot of that face to face. And I mean, I was at a family gathering a while ago, and my husband and I and his sister and some other folks were sitting in the front room. People were walking into the house, and every single person, they were on their phone. They didn't even look up. They didn't even say hello. They didn't even know we were in the room. And then they were all
Mm,
trying to find a plug, to charge their devices because they're on it all the time. And we all just looked at each other like, wow. Just wow.
yeah.
I mean, my phone is in my purse when I'm with people. If I'm out of my home, I am present and connected with them. But it's really something. And these kids, they're the digital natives. I'm not a digital native, but I've seen, the adverse impact that it has just on society as a whole. We've lost that art of being able to have conversation and to connect in really real ways. And the thing is, that's what we want to be able to do. It's what we're desiring, it's what we're craving, and yet we don't know how to do that.
Yes.
And it's problematic. Yeah. So before we get into the next section here, I
Yes.
wanted to share with our audience how they can contact you. Email Coach Pfanner at Gmail, and that's PFANNER, and his website, dadswholead.com. You want to check it out. He's got some really great stuff on his website. Of course, these links and information will be in the show notes. And Thomas also offers a free leadership quiz. Again, go to his website, dadswholead.com. And I think I saw a pop up for that quiz. So when you get onto the website, the pop-up will be there. You have nothing to lose. Take that free leadership quiz. You don't want to miss out on that. So let's get into some teaching and counseling aspects around this particular topic. And my first question is, share with us, what is the difference in your experience and in the coaching that you do as well, the difference between parenting versus leading?
Oh, amazing question. It's a very, very stark difference. When I shared my story when things weren't going well with me and Charles, and I was primarily in the space of parenting. I was just making decisions for Charles about, or, even if I was kind of involved, I'm like, hey, your phone is going to be turned in at this time. We're going to have these barriers. I want to expect you to do these assignments. This is, I know from experience as a dad and being successful as a man, I've done all these things at work. And as a parent, we just want to help our kids make those transitions faster. So instead of having you rewrite the wheel, I'm going to give you the cheat code to be able to do it faster and easier. They don't want that.
No,
they don't want that. And so parenting programs are really focused on the kids. They're focused on the kids' actions, the kids' behaviors. And I've been through these parenting programs, and there are some very powerful aspects to them. But where it fell short for us and why it did not work for our family was the success of the program was dependent on Charles and his actions. And, hey, we're going to do a coin jar for whatever, these gimmicks that are all around adjusting and conditioning his behavior.
Right.
What we do at the leadership training is we focus on ourselves first. We focus on what we can do as men to improve our position as a leader, both through the actions that we take on a daily basis to care for our body, to care for our finances, as well as the actions that we take to care for our relationships. So I don't believe that I can control my son. I do believe I am the leader of the relationship with my son. And as the leader of the relationship, I am accountable for the quality of that relationship.
Right.
If I have the foundation of a quality relationship with my son, I believe that gives me the very best opportunity to influence him in a positive way. I'm not going to control and make the decisions of what he does with his life, but I am going to make certain that each day I am doing something, an action or more than one action that is going to positively impact our connection so that we can spend more time together, have deeper conversations, and I can reach him. Because if all we are as a parent is a police officer, they're going to slow down as they're going by and then speed it back up, or just take a different route and avoid us completely. And that's not the connection or relationship that I want to have as he's moving into adulthood.
Right. Yeah. I so appreciate you explaining that. It's the difference between controlling and empowering. And when you're leading, you're leading by example. So he not only will see it, he'll experience it as well. And I think that's so much more impactful. It goes way deeper. He'll remember it, right? Because he's experiencing it, he's seeing it. And also there's that whole thing about hypocrisy that could play into it, where if you're policing, but you're not even doing those things yourself in your own life, then why would the kid even, want to do it? Because kids watch, they listen, they're like sponges, right? And then out of the mouths, the babes speak. And then sometimes they'll say something, you're going, whoa, they were watching and they were listening and they're seeing and they're observing, right? And I think there's so much more impact where if you're leading by example, they're more willing to follow. I know that for me personally in the workplace. I'm more willing to follow a leader that practices what they preach. If they're not going to do it, I mean, I still operate in integrity, but I don't have a lot of respect for that person when you see that they're doing something very differently than what they're saying. So I appreciate that. So let's get into you've shared your story with your son. If there's any more around that you want to share in this segment, would love to hear from you, but also why teenage rebellion occurs, especially with dads, and then how to reverse the cycle.
Let's go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is one of my favorite topics. And it's a topic that I feel like really, really called to dig into. And before I go into it, I want to share a sermon that I saw from, oh gosh, I'm blanking on the guy's name right now. He wrote a book called Don't Let the Enemy Have a Seat at Your Table. I want to say Louis Giglio. So his sermon, he talked about the Normandy beach invasion on June 6, 1944. And during that time, each platoon was assigned, this was a 50-mile stretch of beach that they had to invade and storm through all of the Allies that was being defended by Nazi Germany. And each section that was attacked was about, I want to say it was between like 50 and 300 yard section of beach that each platoon had to account for. And he said, so what we're called to do as Christians is identify what is the beach, the section of beach that God wants us to storm. And so this space of understanding rebellion is the one that I have felt really called to dig into the most. As it's one that I've experienced with Charles. So I have a theory. It's called box theory. And I developed it while I was teaching middle school.
Okay.
So when I was in middle school, when I was teaching middle school, I noticed, and you probably remember from either being in a middle school classroom or just having the experience as a child, about 2 or 3 minutes before the bell rings to release you from class. Stacy, do you remember the sounds and the energy within the room?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Antsy, getting ready, can't wait till that gets to where it needs to go and we're out. So yes. It was high energy. We're really excited.
Yes. You probably hear zippers zipping up and you hear
right
paper chairs screeching on the floor.
Right.
And as soon as the bell rings, what happens?
Phew, out the door.
Out the door. And so what I observed was as this continued throughout the day, it got more intense. Closer to lunch, people are running even faster.
Yeah.
And as the course of the school year goes on, this burst gets greater and greater until the last day. Kids are pulling fire alarms. They're throwing papers. There is no control. They have this freedom. They have no idea what to do with it.
Right.
So anytime there is a resistance of freedom, a restriction of freedom, it will be met with tremendous opposition. Right. Not just with teenagers, but within any walk of life. We can look at, and we talked a little bit about World War II and the extent that people went to protect their freedom.
Yeah.
People will fight. I mean, there are movies like Braveheart, right? People will do tremendous things to protect and hold and discover freedom and autonomy.
Yeah.
And so box theory is very simple. Anytime we resist that freedom, it's met with opposition. So if you have, do you have kids yourself, correct?
I do not.
Oh, okay. Think of someone that you have. It could be, if you're listening, it could be a child. It could be an employee. It could be somebody who you're working with that maybe you're facing some struggles. You're facing some struggles with that relationship. If you write that person's name down and draw a box around it, if they have the interpretation that you as a mom, as a dad, as a teacher, as a boss are creating regulations, rules, restrictions that are holding them back, it will be met with opposition. You will be seen as the source of restriction.
Right.
And when you are seen as the source of the restriction, you will be met with rebellion.
Right.
And resentment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, depending on an environment, one child's freedom is another child's restriction. So it's all about the perception of the person who's in that box.
Right. I agree.
And so the next question is, okay, that's great. Like, don't my kids need boundaries? Yes.
Yes.
100%. Anyone who knows me, I'm all for I'm all about holding and protecting high expectations for our kids. Because if you're like, oh, I've talked to dads like, well, I'm not expecting a lot. And I stop and say, okay, wait, say that again. I'm not expecting a lot. Okay. How does that land if a boss told you, I'm not expecting much of you?
Right. Oh, there's a lot of messaging in that.
Right. So it's critical that we see it. It's not about the expectations. It's about the framework. So the way that we flip this is called, we go from a box to a sphere. So if you have that same person that you think of, you write a circle around their name. Pause, like keep that there. I'm going to tell you a story about my son, Charles, when he was in fifth grade. He graduates fifth grade. He's going to a new school, Roosevelt Middle School in Eugene, Oregon. We live in a neighborhood that is about a 4.5 mile bike ride from Roosevelt. There's no bus that goes from our house to the middle school he's attending. So what this means is I've got to take the plan without any intervention is I'm responsible to get Charles to school and home every day. I was teaching it was doable, but I knew that there were going to be times where I wouldn't want to do that every single day. And how could we help this situation? So I said, all right, Charles, he knew how to ride a bike. So that was his skill set starting off. But what he didn't know is he didn't know traffic signals, how to signal if he's slowing down. He didn't know that the route from our house to the school, there was a skill set that he was missing to go to the next level of independence, which was being able to bike himself from school and back. So what I did as a father in that time, that summer, we probably spent three or four sessions, let's say an hour each, riding from our house to the school and back. And by the last one, he was leading the whole thing. I said, Charles, you're ready. You can do this on your own.
Yeah.
You can get yourself to school now. And so as a 11-year-old, he thought that was awesome, that he was going to be able to get himself to school, and some of his peers were a little behind that, and they didn't have that same level of autonomy. And so, he felt like, yeah, I'm independent. I'm making this happen on my own. And it wasn't just about the skill of being able to get to school, but then he started to do other routes and reaching out to other spaces around town. And he's able to do that on his own and grow confidence and his ability to maneuver. And that's a huge part of freedom. So
yeah,
what I did was I took the framing of me being a source of restriction, and I flipped it to being a source of growth that allows more freedom with the development of skills.
Right.
So I like that. This is the key is we have to identify where our kids are. What is it that they are looking for? Is it a driver's license? Is it a job? Is it a girl? What is the gap that is stopping them from getting there?
Right.
And then within that gap, which a lot of people just see a gap and they say, I guess that's just is what it is. I'm not there yet because I'm not old enough, because I'm not tall enough, because whatever. We say, what is the skill that needs to be developed? And as the skill is developed, we go. So it's not about age. A lot of time, oh, well, you're only 12 years old. You're not old enough to ABC. Or my kid's not listening to me. Oh, it's because he's 14 years old. That's just the way 14-year-olds are. Very self-limiting belief that's going to block potential growth. Not just for you and your kid, but also, if you're saying, oh, you're 14 years old, that's just the way things are.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, I'm 14 years old. I shouldn't earn this much money, or I shouldn't be able to climb this mountain, or whatever it is. Creating blocks around their age. And so it can be, it can create a self-limiting pattern.
Yeah, absolutely. That's in the work that I do, that's known as a projected lie, right? And so, and eventually, because it's coming from the person that's the adult, right? Oh, well, you're only 12 or you're only 14, right? And I love that you said 12, and immediately I thought, well, Jesus was teaching in the temple at 12. And so I'm like, I know he was God. He's God, please. I get that. But still, he knew who he was, right? He didn't have the limits. And so I think with parents too, and especially with dads, and a lot of the work that I do too, it's dads that identify and recognize and release the gifts and talents in their children. And that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
Right. As they lead, that's how they do that. They are observing, they are seeing, and they're helping their kids, either develop it or they're calling it out. And really, age is just a number anyway. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And so, okay, so then so you had the box with the person's name in it, and then the circle, right?
Yes.
Did we need to come back to that, don't we?
Sure. So if you have the box theory is there, and you can think about every action has an equal or opposite what? Reaction. So if you press into the box and you create, this is kind of a cycle that can happen. It's like, all right, teenage daughter, you're grounded. Now you got to stay in your room. And what does she do?
She does a number of things.
Right. She does sneaks out, whatever. She's like, oh, you're going to push me in here. I'm going to push back.
Yeah.
That is the pattern that we have to recognize. Like, if we push them into a box, they're going to push back.
Yeah.
The spheres. So if you have a circle and then you have another circle on the outside, the inner circle where the child's name is, or your name is, whoever, that's their current skills and abilities. And it goes on to us, for me, like I run a business. All right. So my skills and abilities and what I'm able to accomplish within a business is a reflection of my skill set, my ability to lead myself, make decisions, help lead other people that can also help the program. It is, my limitations are based on my skills, not the economy, not exterior circumstances. It's my skills and effort. So the next level out is the target. What is the target that your son or daughter is moving towards? Whether that's a driver's license, whether that's graduating high school, whether that's getting into a college. And so easy. I'm just going to use the example of getting into a college. They think it's about filling out an application and doing these things and submitting it. But no, like, what does the college looking for from you? Who is the person that they want you to be? What are the skills that you want to display? So don't just go and help with a community garden because it looks good on a resume. Help with the community garden because you are building yourself into the man or the woman who is going to contribute and care and love.
Right.
That's what we're looking for, right? It's the skill development, not just from a physical standpoint of can you build a picnic table, but also can you relate to another person? Can you take care of yourself? Can you make wise decisions? All of these things, they're little steps of independence. And if you wait, so often I see parents wait to develop their independence because they want to protect their kids. And this is I'm going to be direct with how, and this is going to come off. Some of the people are going to get turned off the way I say this, but it's the truth of what it is. Like the feminine energy is much more protective and nurturing.
It is.
Yes. So the feminine imperative is to protect our kids. And
Right.
it's not that that's bad, but we need to see the feminine imperative in our society as it has been growing over the last couple decades. There's more protection for our kids, but the consequence to that is there's not the opportunity for growth because there is that restriction and safety and protecting it. So when kids get to be 18 and when they were 17, they had to ask to go to the bathroom and they had to get a ride from mom and dad to school and they had their lunches prepared for them and they're loved and nurtured, which is great. And now you're 18, you should be able to do this all on your own. It doesn't come overnight. How can we start preparing kids from the age of 2 to develop independence, to be able to explore and make mistakes and learn and be the main character in their own story so that they know when things don't work out, they're able to overcome and grow. So independence, that's why it's the spheres, right? Like it's a continuous process to help us help our kids grow in their confidence to be able to do it. I'll share one more story about this because it's really cool to take it all the way back to like my daughter Leela. She's 2. Right? So we make eggs in the morning. I give her an egg. I say, okay, you're going to crack the egg. First time she cracks it, it falls on the floor. It goes in her hand. It's like she cries. She's terrified, right? It's like, what just happened? Okay, we clean it up. It's fine, right? So as long as I can keep having her try to crack the egg, is she eventually going to get it and understand how to crack an egg into a bowl?
Yeah, she will.
Yes. The only thing that's stopping her from being able to do that is either me stepping in and saying, no, you're not able to do that yet, or her belief that the last time I tried to crack an egg, it didn't turn out well. It was a mess, and I don't want to try it again.
Right. That's a limbic experience.
Yes. And so when we train that pattern of, I'm not sure about this, I'm not going to try it again, it goes into adulthood. I applied for the job. I don't want to try that again. It didn't feel good when I didn't get it. But how many times do we hear about people who's like, that get the best job are the ones that are willing to apply for 100 and get turned down 99, and then the one that they get is
exactly. So you just have to keep going, right? It's developing that resilience, that endurance, right? The perseverance and stuff like that. And in the work that I do, it's that whole limbic system, right? So in the limbic system, it records your positive and negative experiences. But in order to have healing where there's been those negative, hurtful, wounding experience, you have to have an opposite positive experience. It has to be experienced. It's experiential, right? So the fact that, I always bring up the Thomas Edison, my goodness,
yes.
How many failed experiments with the light bulb until he finally got it? 1,000. Can you imagine if he stopped at 1? We might still be in the dark. I don't know. But, but I also think too, it's really important and I don't necessarily call it a failure. It didn't work. So what can we take from that? What can we learn from that so that the next time we give it a go, we'll get closer to, where we want to be? Like with your daughter, you didn't step in and go, all right, well, you're too young and maybe you can't do this right now because it fell on the floor the first time. And she was upset. She wanted to succeed in that. But you patiently, right? You were patient with her and you encouraged her to keep moving forward, to keep trying until she got it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's just, and I like to share that story because it doesn't matter how old your child is, how young or how old.
Yeah.
Like there's always the skill of independence, even for me and everybody else, adults listening, we're still learning to be, independent and take care of ourselves and our family around us in new ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to part 2 because I know you're going to be sharing a little bit more practical tips and steps that people can take. And so before we close out today, is there, you've shared quite a lot of wisdom today, but is there any like word of wisdom or a nugget that you would like to share before we close out?
Yes. Every time I'm asked this question, I like to come back to, if you're a dad out there and you're struggling and your kids are maybe pushing back, or you're having a tough time in the game of fatherhood, that's actually a good sign. That means that you're stretching your limits, you're stretching the edge of your kids. It doesn't mean that every single decision we make is right or wrong, but what it does mean is the dads that are playing in the game and having a tough time, it means that you're taking risks and you love your kids and you care. Because I know a lot of dads and moms who they don't have problems with their kids because they're just take a back seat. And so I encourage you, if you're a dad and you're listening to this, you're like, man, I'm having this challenge with my son or my daughter. Good. That means that you love your kids and you care and you're working to stretch them.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. And for those of you that are watching and listening, make sure that you reach out to Thomas. His email is Coach Pfanner, that's PFANNER @gmail.com. Or you can check out his website at dadswholead.com. Make sure you get on there. He's got a lot of really great stuff there. And don't pass up on taking that free leadership quiz. Again, you can find it on his website at dadswholead.com. There's a pop-up for that free leadership quiz. You have nothing to lose. Go ahead and give it a go and see what happens. Thank you so much, Thomas, for being here. I know that there's a lot that you've shared today and people will just need to sit with it. And I hope that they are inspired, to get in the game. Your kids need you, so thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. And for those of you dads that are considering, coming into the kingdom of God, and you've been hearing about Jesus, he's the ultimate. He is the ultimate leader, and he has so many great things that he can help you with, along with people that he's placed on this earth to carry out the work that he's given them. So Coach Thomas here can help you in the practicals right here, right now. And with Jesus walking alongside you, he can certainly help you be the dad that he's created you to be for your kids, and the dad for your family and the husband as well. So if you're thinking about, I don't know if I should say yes to Jesus, what's the cost? Well, there is a cost, but it's a cost you do want to pay, and because he paid the ultimate cost for you by dying on the cross so that you can have eternity with him. And if you have any questions about that, I'd love for you to reach out to me. You can reach me on my website at trueyouministries.com. Call me at 626-461-3344, or email me at info@trueyouministries.com. I also do have a free consultation that you could just schedule a free consult, and we can talk about the Lord and answer any questions that you have about salvation. What does that mean? What does that look like? I'd be happy to speak with you. Again, thank you everyone for watching and listening, and stay tuned for part 2. You've been listening to True You Ministries with me, Stacy Echeverria, your pastoral counselor. I'm a licensed pastoral counselor whose own journey has taught me the importance of having a safe place to discuss the harder issues of life. You can learn more about me and my heartfelt desire to help people, much like yourself, who may be at a place of pain and confusion by calling me at 626-461-3344. That's 626-461-3344, or feel free to email me at info@trueyouministries.com. That email, once again, is info@trueyouministries.com. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and may God richly bless you.